All right, for today's episode, I'm going to go through the process of making a lidded container from a fully thrown single object. Originally, this piece was set up like so. This is a fired piece, cone 10 reduction that I fired to with some addition of some metal. I will go through the majority of this making process and show you how to make a lidded container like so. A lidded container like this, that size, prior to firing, I typically used about 2 pounds. This is what the piece will look like after it's thrown. And you can see this is the flange that I create here, and it will go through, after it goes through the drying process, that's when I'll open this up and get this lid to fit into the lower section. On a profile section, you can see what I'm dealing with here is your typical cylinder. This section here is pushed in with a tool, and for that tool I'll typically use something like these tools with a little bit of an eraser on them. It has a nice flat edge. I don't want to use a rounded stick, so that's going to sit right in there. And if it's not something like this, sometimes I also just use a piece of metal. This is a little bit of a hacksaw blade. Popsicle sticks work really good for this process also, kind of grinding them down on one end so it's a nice flat edge. But this is what we're looking for to go through today. I will throw a piece and then I will get this one ready and go through the trimming process and show you how this is finished up here. So again, I'm starting with 2 pounds of clay. The trick on this piece is really just the closing process with getting this opened up and to close this and get it sealed up. So I'm going to open this up as I typically would a cylinder. On my pieces, I like to have a little bit of a slope on the inside that helps me when I'm trimming. Knowing that I'm going to close this piece up, my first pull, I'm pushing this over tighter than I normally would into that cone shape and really kind of establish this, that it's going to be closed up. So really the outside hand has to really be above that interior hand and make sure it's really pushing over. So in normal throwing, straight up and down, my fingertips are across from each other. In this process, to really make sure it's moving over like this, my fingertips on my right hand are really on top of my left hand and pushing over. And then at this point, when I'm going to start closing this in, it's really 3 points of contact that I'm pushing in. So my fingers are really kind of set up in a triangle. And so I'm kind of squeezing these in. At the same time I'm doing that, I have a lot of fingers working together here. I'm trying to squeeze this out at the same time, meaning that as I push this in and I get this to go in smaller, this clay is thickening up. So in order to stop that from happening, this area here, these fingers are kind of pushing and squeezing this as it goes in towards the tip. And once I kind of get that connected like so here, then I'm just gonna push that together and kind of push down on this, and that really kind of solidifies that. Now what I have this advantage of is I have this kind of balloon shape, and from this balloon shape I can mess around with this shape a little bit and get it to work, kind of add my dimensions, really push on this, press that section down here, and look for the angles. Now, some of the things that can't be done on this, you can't go through this process and do it on a round form. You're taking away about a 1/2 inch of this clay here, and so if I was to do this on a very round form, it's not going to match up. The area in which you do this has to be stacked right on top of each other. So I can add some movement to this but I have to know where I'm gonna make this intersection of where these two pieces come together. And that right now has to be in this section right here where both of these are kind of lined up right on top of each other. If I was to do that here in this lower section where this is flaring out, then these two pieces aren't going to come together and fit after the firing, and they'll just kind of, or not even before the firing, right after the making, they'll just kind of fall right on top of each other. So it's important that that area is known exactly where you're going to push that clay in. And I just really want to get this shape defined. All right, so that's what I'm looking for. I have my basic shape there. Any type of decoration, this is the point where you want to do that. I use a lot of these textured ribs here. I really like this, the patterns on some of these, so and I like just adding texture to my pieces. So I'm going to do that now. As it's kind of a balloon, I have that ability to push on this a little bit more. Once I start taking this tool and pressing in this flange here, it's going to lose a lot of its strength because it's going to kind of get weak in this area here. And if I allow this to push in too much, this top piece will actually collapse down on top of it. So I'm pushing this in about a little bit, about 1/4 of an inch, maybe closer to 1/3 of an inch. I'm going to hold this very firmly like I do a pencil. Keeping this tool really straight up and down to make sure my flange stays straight up and down. I don't want this to be on any type of angle like that because then it won't fit as good. Once that is done, now I'm just waiting until the leather hard stage for it to dry. Take my wire, I'm going to run this underneath here. What you've done is you've just created a big balloon of air. So as this shrinks, it dries, it shrinks, it needs to release that air. So I'm going to take a needle tool and I'm going to poke a hole in this guy. And I want to do this knowing which way I'm going to cut out this flange. So knowing that this flange I want to keep on the top and fall into the bottom, I'm going to take my needle tool and just pierce that right at the bottom there. All right. I'll set that off to the side. Now on this one here, what I want to do is kind of get this set up for my trimming. I'm just going to use the old method. I'm just kind of sticking it on here, a little water, create a little bit of a slip, and just tap this in the center. Again, if this is something that you're not comfortable doing, using the needle tool to get that in the center, or Griffin grip, any of those will work. I'm going to take my needle tool right at the bottom here and allow this to start very slowly cutting into this. You won't see it automatically just drop in, but you can see how that flange is kind of set up there. Now it does take a little bit of trimming. One of the first things I want to address is this. There's a lot of twisting that happens here going through that closing process. And so typically what I like to do is just take a little piece of clay here. This nice little round ball of clay, and I'm going to push that in there. That seems to really alleviate a lot of that twisting. As it unwinds through the firing process, you can get some spiral cracking at that point. So that little addition of clay right there really tends to help, right? Let your piece be your friend, and I'm just gonna kind of set that up right on top of there. In very minimal trimming, but I do want to take a little bit of this edge off here. Do the same on the inside. I'm really just kind of smoothing this off, getting rid of some of that extra, making sure it's got a nice flange coming down. I do that on the outside of this here. I should also do this on the inside here. What I tend to do is that my throwing rings are very obvious on the inside of my pieces. And so you want to think about your waxing. And so I'm creating a line here. It goes down about a third of an inch inside of here. That's nice and smooth. And creating just a little bit of a ledge. And that's what I will wax when it gets into the glazing process. So you remembered in some of my other videos, I think about the waxing and the glazing process ahead of time, and that's just another part of it, of being prepared for that. So I can tell it's a little snug right now, so that's fine because I have plenty to move away here. It's a nice, always get a nice, really good fit lid with this process without using the calipers. But like any lid, you don't want to get those too tight. They'll center or fuse together in the firing process. All right. Once that lid process is done and cleaned up, you can see that little bit of a ledge that I put in here. That's for my waxy line right along here. I'll get some of the little clay boogers and stuff in there. I'll clean those out as it starts to dry. The inside of these tend to be a little wet just because they've been sealed like that. But you can see here, now I have a nice good fitting lid. I consider these to be some type of salt jars along that line. They can be used for a lot of different things. On something like this, very simply, I do some additions of some similar to what like a disc would be, and then I throw some sections here for my little handles on top with some rusted metal. So anyway, that is your lidded form from a single thrown piece. Again, my name is Tony Borchardt, and I'm at Fontbonne University in St. Louis, Missouri. So if you have any questions, feel free to look me up or contact me through my YouTube channel. And thanks for visiting.